Okay, so this is part 3 in our little video series on responsive HTML and web fonts. This one will be the web fonts part of it. Move my location here downstairs. That is a Terry Redlin painting in the background, South Dakota painter. I think he's deceased now. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to our website. Up until this time, we've been living with these system fonts. This one being Impact, and this being Courier New, or New Courier, whichever one it was. And we can be fancier than that. Up until, well, geez, not that many years ago, we were limited on the number of fonts we could use in website design. At some point, we had Arial, Verdana, New Courier, Times New Roman, Georgia, maybe a few others. Maybe Trebuchet was one of the fonts you could use. But anyway, now with the advent of web fonts, we can pretty up our websites. And fonts are pretty important for the personality of the website. You can, if you've had typography before, you know that the serif fonts tend to be a little bit more conservative, whereas sans serif fonts look a little bit more modern. And that's like a real top level quick typography class. So we've been living with these fonts, and there are better fonts that we can use. So a couple different ways we can do web fonts. One is we could purchase web fonts or make web fonts and install them on our server. That takes a little technical know-how, but you could always explore that option. Another thing that we can do is we can go to google.com/fonts. And what's nice about this is Google has a collection of web fonts that they go ahead and host on their server, and the whole world gets to use them. It's pretty nice of them. Right now, at the time of this recording, Google has 708 fonts in its library collection. All right, so we're going to learn how to add Google Fonts to our website. And what we need to do is you come here to Google Fonts and you can start browsing all of the different fonts. They've got different categories of fonts. And you can, they even have handwritten fonts if you ever wanted to explore that, and all you have to do is check or uncheck these options. I got a little delay on my computer here, I think. And you can see that they even have script and handwritten fonts. So that can make things pretty interesting for your website. I wouldn't ever use these for your main reading content. This gets hard to read after a while. You might think it looks cool, but after a while, if it's hard to read, that works against you. So I'm going, there are two fonts I already know that I want to use. One of them is called Avo. Oh, come on, isn't there? Let me reset this. So AV. Okay, hold on a sec. I gotta figure something out. Okay, sorry about that. That font is called Arvo, not Avo. One letter off. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my collection. Just a little button over here. And you'll see that it gets put in here. But I'm going to have another one. Generally in typography, it's a good idea to have two fonts. One for your main body content and maybe your links, footer areas, and then one for headings. I like to have a different font for my headings. So I'm going to go and choose one called Oswald. And there's Oswald. And there we go. I got Arvo and Oswald in my collection. Now I am going to hide this little window so I can get down to the button I need. When I'm ready to use these, there's a button here called Use. So I'll click on that. And you have a couple more options here. I'm going to use the normal option in both of these, but you could experiment with this. The more fonts you load, the slower it'll take to load your website. I don't know. It gives you a little gauge. It might be good to heed that, but generally loading fonts doesn't take a whole lot of time. If you're good with the selections that you have, we click on Use again. And we should now get code that we can copy and paste. The first one is this line right here. As soon as I select it, it's highlighted. You can see that it gives you the code for adding a web font to your website. So I'll copy that. I'll come back to Dreamweaver. I need to go to my source code, and in the header area, has to be somewhere between my head tags. I'll go ahead and put it right below my style sheet. We go ahead and paste that. Now, as soon as we paste it, we get a red code error. Dreamweaver doesn't like these single quotes. You can see that we use double quotes up here. For these fonts, you can use single quotes or double quotes. They actually work the same, as long as you're consistent. So right now, even though we get an error in Dreamweaver, this code does work. But just to keep things consistent, since I'm using double quotes everywhere else, I'm going to change all of these single quotes to double quotes just to remain consistent in my coding. I certainly wouldn't have to. It would work just fine, but I like being consistent. All right, now our error has gone away. Go ahead and hit save. Now, just because I've linked this code from Google Fonts doesn't mean that the fonts have been applied yet. So I have one font called Arvo, another one called Oswald. I need to assign those in my styles. All right, I'll come back up here to the body tags. I originally had Courier New, and this is where I'm going to put Arvo ahead of it. Arvo will now be the font that's used for body instead of Courier New. The Arvo font was kind of a monospace font. It's similar to Courier New, but I think it looks a little bit better. And now everything on the site will be changed to Arvo. However, I'm going to add Oswald in front of Impact for my H1, H2, H3, and H4 tags. Let's go ahead and hit save. So I've done two things. I've had to add this link exactly as we copied it from Google Fonts and put that in my head tags. It has to be in between my head. And once I have that set up, I can come to my styles and add that font to my font family. Google, if you don't want the font family you had in there before, Google gives you code for your CSS if you wanted to copy and paste that. I'll just go ahead and keep what I had and just add Oswald in front of it. So if for some reason Google explodes and goes down in California with an earthquake, and maybe the web font servers all get destroyed at the same time, my website will revert to Impact after the Google Oswald font is gone. My guess is that's not going to happen. And if that's happening, there's probably bigger problems going on in the world than just my website font showing properly. So everything's saved. Always make sure that your files are saved before trying to view. And let's see what that looks like. We come back to the Philo font. So this was where we had the Impact, and this is where we had Courier New. And we'll hit refresh. And ta-da! We now have our web font, which definitely changes the personality of the website a lot. I think this font right here is a nicer reading font than the Courier New. And we could even, if we wanted an H tag to bold that, we could come here to font weight and change that to bold. We had Impact in there before, which was plenty bold all by itself. This font could look a little bit more bold by adding font weight, and it didn't change it a whole lot, just a little bit. There are little numbers that we could add, 100 through 900, that you can play around with as well as to how bold you want things to be. So there's 800. 900 would be the most I could add to this. And that's what it looks like. Also at Google Fonts, I could have chosen the bold version of Oswald, although it would have been a 700 version. It would have only gotten so bold, but I think you get the idea of how the fonts work. All right, and that is, let's go back to our site. That was adding web fonts. Pretty easy, huh? Not too bad. And it does add it does slow your site down just a little bit to make that extra HTTP request to Google Web Fonts, but I think for the personality and how it definitely lets you add a lot more personality to your site, I think it's definitely worth it. Now, if you stuck to the regular fonts, Arial, Verdana, that's the fastest. By adding web fonts, just tiny eensy weensy bit, you slow down your website. But everything has a cost to it, and you just have to weigh out to see if it's worth it. In this case, I'd say, oh yeah, this is worth it for sure. I'd say 99% of the time it's worth adding web fonts, and Google just makes this really easy. It's free, it works, they got a great selection of fonts, 700 at this time, and they're probably only going to keep adding to it. And it's just a really easy way to add font choices to your website. All right, there you go, web fonts.